name is Arabella Kensington, and for most of my life I wasn't a daughter. I was an investment. If you've ever grown up in a family where your last name opens doors before you even knock, you understand something most people don't. Love is negotiable. Image is not. My father, Charles Kensington, owned one of the largest venture capital firms in the Northeast. He didn't build companies. He acquired them, controlled them, restructured them, and he raised me the same way. I was educated at the right schools, introduced to the right circles, photographed beside the right people. By 25, I had already been subtly introduced to 3 appropriate men, sons of billionaires, hedge fund heirs, political families. Strategic alliances disguised as romance. But then I met Daniel. Not at a fundraiser. Not at a private club. I met him because I got lost. I had been driving myself, something my father hated, and took a wrong exit into a quieter part of the city. My car started making a strange noise, and I pulled into a modest garage lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Daniel was underneath a truck when I walked in, grease on his hands, music playing softly from an old radio. He rolled out, looked at me and didn't blink twice at my designer coat. "You look stressed," he said casually. Not "How can I help you, ma'am?" Not "Do you know who I am?" Just "You look stressed." I almost laughed. No one had ever said that to me without calculating something. He fixed the loose belt in my engine in 10 minutes. Charged me less than the standard rate. When I tried to tip him triple, he shook his head. "Pay what's fair," he said. "Not what makes you feel superior." That sentence stayed with me. Pay what's fair. Not what makes you feel superior. I went back a week later. Then again. And again. First, I told myself it was curiosity. Then I realized it was relief. Daniel didn't care about my surname. Didn't Google me. Didn't ask about inheritance. He asked about books. Music. Whether I was actually happy. No one had asked me that before. Not sincerely. When I finally told my parents about him, I didn't expect approval. But I also didn't expect warfare. "A mechanic?" my father repeated, his voice disturbingly calm. "Yes. Is this a phase?" "No." He leaned forward slowly. "You understand what this looks like?" There it was. Looks. Always looks. It looks like I'm in love. It looks like weakness. The word sliced clean. My mother finally spoke, her voice thin. "Arabella, you were raised for more." More. Meaning wealth. Status. Optics. "Maybe I was raised wrong," I replied quietly. That was the first time my father's expression changed. Not angry. Cold. "You will end this," he said. "No." The air shifted instantly. "You are not built for struggle," he warned. "You think you are romanticizing humility. You will regret this." "I'd rather regret my choice than live yours," I said. I thought that would be the peak. I was wrong. Daniel proposed 8 months later. In the simplest way possible. On the rooftop of his apartment building. City lights below. No orchestra. No diamond the size of a small country. Just sincerity. "I can't promise luxury," he told me. "But I will never treat you like a transaction." That was enough. When my father found out about the engagement, he didn't yell. He strategized. He called a family dinner. Invited business associates. Turned it into a performance. 300 guests. Crystal chandeliers. Press subtly present. I knew it was a trap. But I walked into it anyway. Because I refused to be ashamed. During dessert, my father tapped his glass. "I have an announcement," he said smoothly. The room quieted. "My daughter has made an unconventional decision." Soft laughter. Polite. Controlled. "She has chosen to marry a man without background, without assets, without alignment to this family's future." Every word deliberate. Daniel sat beside me, spine straight. "And because actions have consequences," my father continued, "Arabella will no longer be financially tied to Kensington Holdings." Murmurs spread. No trust distribution. No property allocation. No voting shares. It wasn't anger. It was execution. Public financial exile. "If she chooses this path," he finished, "she does so alone." I felt the eyes. 300 silent witnesses. Daniel squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to," he whispered. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't about money. It was about control. And if I stayed seated in that chair, he would own me forever. So I stood, without raising my voice, without tears. You taught me something valuable, Father, I said clearly. The room stilled. You taught me that everything has a price. Pause. But you never taught me my worth. I removed the diamond bracelet he'd given me for my 21st birthday, placed it on the table. If freedom costs inheritance, I continued calmly, that's a bargain. Gasps. Camera subtly lifting. And then I did something no one expected. I walked out before he could respond. Not running. Not emotional. Just done. Daniel followed. Outside, the night air felt different. Lighter. Terrifying. Free. The next morning, my bank accounts connected to family trusts were frozen. Cards declined. Access revoked. Headlines quietly circulated in elite circles. Kensington heiress disowned. Friends disappeared. Invitations stopped. I moved into Daniel's 2-bedroom apartment. Learned how to live without silent safety nets. I started working at a community business incubator, helping small startups with planning and structure. Irony, right? The billionaire's daughter helping founders who actually built things. It was humbling, hard, real. And for the first time in my life, I felt capable. But what I didn't know, what no one knew, was that Daniel had been building something too. Not in secret to deceive me, but in silence to protect himself from exactly the type of judgment my father embodied. 6 months after that dinner, at one of the most prestigious innovation galas in the country, my father would finally understand something he never believed. He didn't lose a daughter. He underestimated a man. And the reveal? It would not be quiet. The first 3 months after my father disowned me were the hardest of my life. Not because I missed the penthouse. Not because I missed the staff. But because I had to meet myself without the safety of my last name. For the first time, no one treated me carefully. Landlords didn't care who I was. Employers didn't feel intimidated. Cashiers didn't smile artificially. It was disorienting and freeing. Daniel never once said, "I told you so." Never once looked at me with pity. Instead, he treated me like I had always belonged in his world, which made me realize something uncomfortable. Maybe I did. I started working full-time at the incubator, helping early-stage entrepreneurs structure their business plans. Ironically, I was good at it. I had grown up absorbing negotiations at dinner tables. I understood equity, risk, scaling. But this time, no one handed me the room. I earned it. Meanwhile, Daniel kept working at the garage. Same hours. Same routine. Same grease-stained hands. At least that's what I thought. There were small things I ignored at first. Late-night emails he'd step into the hallway to answer. Calls he'd take outside. Occasional trips he'd describe vaguely as meeting someone about a project. When I asked directly once, he smiled. "You trust me?" "Yes." "Then that's enough for now." It wasn't evasive. It was calm. And I chose to trust him. The gala invitation arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Embossed silver lettering. The annual Vanguard Innovation Benefit. The most exclusive tech charity event in the country. My father would be there. Of course he would. He sat on their advisory board. I assumed the invite was a clerical oversight. My name still lingering in elite databases. "I don't think we should go," I told Daniel that night. He looked at the card carefully. "I think we should." I studied him. "Why?" "Because you shouldn't have to hide." Hide? Was that what I'd been doing? Avoiding rooms that once belonged to me? "I don't want a scene," I admitted. He met my eyes. "There won't be one." The confidence in his voice felt different. Grounded. Certain. And something in me shifted. "Fine," I said. "We go." The night of the gala felt surreal. I wore a deep emerald gown I'd bought myself. Not gifted, not curated by a stylist. Daniel wore a tailored black suit I had never seen before. It fit him too perfectly. "You clean up well," I teased lightly. He smirked. "You'd be surprised." When we stepped into the ballroom, conversation dipped. Whispers began almost immediately. "She actually came. With him. Does he even belong here?" My father stood near the center of the room speaking with investors. He saw me within seconds. His expression hardened. Then he saw Daniel. And something almost amused crossed his face. He approached slowly. "I see exile hasn't taught you discretion," he said coolly. "I wasn't aware love required permission," I replied calmly. His eyes shifted to Daniel. "Enjoying the catering, son?" Daniel didn't react. "Actually," he said evenly, "I'm here on invitation." My father chuckled. "Yes, guests can purchase tickets." "Not as a guest," Daniel replied. The subtle tension made my pulse quicken. Before my father could respond, the stage lights flickered slightly, signaling the beginning of the keynote announcement. The host took the podium. "Tonight," she began, "we are honoring a visionary whose contributions to urban mobility technology are transforming small businesses nationwide." Urban mobility? I frowned slightly. The host continued. "This year's Vanguard Impact Leader Award goes to..." A pause. Then, "Daniel Reyes." Time stopped. My father's face drained of color. Applause erupted. Spotlights moved. And Daniel, my Daniel, stepped forward calmly. Not hesitantly. Not awkwardly. Confidently. I stared at him, heart pounding. He leaned toward me briefly. "You trust me," he reminded softly. Then he walked toward the stage. The host continued speaking. "Founder and CEO of RevTech Solutions, a company revolutionizing diagnostic software for independent auto shops across the country." CEO? Founder? My breath caught. The screen behind him lit up with data. Revenue growth. National expansion. Strategic partnerships. My father stood frozen. RevTech. I had heard that name before. Multiple times. In business reports at the incubator. A fast-scaling tech firm. Recently valued in the high 8 figures. Daniel took the microphone. He looked different under those lights. Not because of the suit. Because of the authority. "5 years ago," he began calmly, "I worked inside auto shops watching small business owners struggle with outdated systems." He paused. "I wanted to build something that gave them leverage." Leverage. The same language my father respected. "I didn't have investors at first," Daniel continued. "I had belief." The room applauded softly. "And I learned something important," he said, eyes scanning the crowd briefly. "Sometimes people mistake humility for lack of ambition." His gaze landed unmistakably on my father. "But real power doesn't need to announce itself early." The applause grew louder. My chest felt tight. Not from humiliation. From realization. He hadn't hidden this from me to deceive me. He had hidden it because he knew exactly how my world would react. After the speech, journalists surrounded him. Board members shook his hand. Investors approached. My father remained still. Processing. Recalculating. Finally, he walked toward us again. "RevTech," he said slowly. "I reviewed your Series B reports last quarter." Daniel nodded politely. "We declined outside acquisition." My father's jaw tightened. "You turned down Kensington Holdings." "I did." Silence between them. Measured. Heavy. "I don't take partnerships rooted in ego," Daniel said evenly. The statement was surgical. Precise. My father looked at me then. Not with anger. With something worse. Recognition. He had misjudged the board entirely. "You planned this," he said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "I built this." The rest of the evening blurred. Press photos. Handshakes. Whispers turning into admiration. I stood beside Daniel as people who once dismissed him now competed for his attention. But the biggest shift wasn't external. It was internal. For the first time in my life, I wasn't standing behind my father's shadow. I was standing beside someone who didn't need his approval. And neither did I. When we finally stepped outside into the cool night air, I exhaled deeply. "You were building an empire," I said softly. He smiled. "I was building options." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed to know you chose me without the safety net." The honesty didn't hurt. It grounded me. "You would have chosen me anyway," he added gently. I nodded. "Yes." He took my hand. "You didn't lose anything walking away." I looked back at the glittering ballroom. "No," I said quietly. "I gained clarity. But what I didn't realize then was that my father wasn't finished. He didn't lose gracefully. He recalculated. And the next move would test everything. The gala changed everything. But not in the way most people think. Yes, my father was publicly humbled. Yes, the whispers shifted from she married down to he outplayed Kensington. But men like my father don't collapse when they lose. They strategize. 3 days after the gala, he requested a private meeting. Not with me. With Daniel. At Kensington Holdings headquarters. Glass tower. 42nd floor. The room with no curtains, because my father liked the symbolism of transparency, while hiding everything that mattered. I can handle this, Daniel told me gently before leaving. But I went anyway. Not into the meeting room. I waited in the lobby, because I wasn't going to be excluded from my own life again. When Daniel walked into that office, my father didn't greet him with hostility. He greeted him with respect, which somehow was more dangerous. I misjudged you, my father began. Daniel nodded slightly. You did. No defensiveness. No arrogance. Just fact. I'm prepared to correct that, my father continued. Kensington Holdings is interested in a strategic acquisition of RevTech. Acquisition. There it was. Control dressed as partnership. Daniel didn't sit immediately. We're not for sale. Everything has a price. Daniel smiled faintly. That's where we differ. My father folded his hands. I'm offering expansion capital, international scaling, board influence. Your valuation would triple overnight. Daniel's voice stayed even. And I'd answer to you. Yes. Silence. Heavy. Measured. Daniel finally sat down. You publicly humiliated my wife, he said calmly. You tried to reduce her worth to a balance sheet. My father's jaw tightened slightly. She chose instability. She chose freedom. The temperature in that room shifted. My father leaned back. Let's speak honestly, he said coolly. You married her knowing who she was. Yes. You benefited from that exposure. No. You expect me to believe this is coincidence? Daniel's voice didn't rise. You think in leverage. I think in loyalty. My father studied him. And for the first time he had no immediate counter. RevTech isn't for sale, Daniel said again. Not now. Not later. He stood. The meeting was over. When Daniel came downstairs, I knew from his expression what had happened. He tried to buy you. Yes. And I declined. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. Are you scared? I asked quietly. He looked at me carefully. I'm prepared. Prepared. For what? That answer came sooner than we expected. 2 weeks later, negative press began circulating. Anonymous articles questioning RevTech's early funding. Speculation about undisclosed investors. Old photos of Daniel in front of the garage, framed as deception. The narrative was subtle but strategic. From mechanic to mogul. What isn't he telling us? I didn't need proof to know where it originated. My father didn't yell when he was angry. He destabilized. Daniel handled it calmly. Press conference. Transparent financial breakdowns. Full investor disclosure. Every question answered. Stock confidence stabilized within days. But the message was clear. My father was willing to attack. Not loudly, but precisely. That's when I made my first move. Not emotional. Strategic. I requested a meeting with the Kensington Foundation board. Technically, I no longer held shares, but my name still carried weight in philanthropic circles. And I had spent months working with startup founders who admired RevTech's impact on small businesses. At the board meeting, I presented data. RevTech had increased revenue for over 3,000 independent garages nationwide, reduced operational waste, created hundreds of jobs. I framed it carefully. This is the kind of innovation the foundation claims to support. Subtle. Calculated. Within a week, the Kensington Foundation publicly recognized RevTech as a featured innovation partner. My father couldn't oppose it without damaging his own philanthropic image. He called me that night. You're interfering. No, I said evenly. I'm participating. You don't have authority. I have influence. Silence. Then, you're enjoying this. I paused. No. I'm protecting what you tried to harm. That was revenge moment number one. Not loud, not cruel, just precise. But the real confrontation happened a month later. At my mother's birthday dinner. Small gathering. Family only. Tension thick enough to taste. My father avoided Daniel directly. But halfway through dinner, he set his glass down and said, "You know, Arabella, you could have handled this differently." Differently how? I asked calmly. You could have negotiated terms before walking away. Negotiated? He still didn't understand. I wasn't negotiating, I replied. I was leaving. You threw away generational security. I met his gaze directly. You tried to use it as leverage. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. We were scared for you. Of poverty? I asked gently. Of instability. I softened slightly. Instability isn't marrying someone without money. Pause. It's loving someone who treats you like a transaction. Silence wrapped around the table. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. My father's control wasn't slipping financially. It was slipping emotionally. And that terrified him more. A week later, something unexpected happened. Kensington Holdings lost a major municipal contract. The same contract RevTech had quietly supported through back-end logistics. The board began questioning leadership decisions. Public confidence dipped. Investors grew cautious. My father called Daniel again. Not for acquisition. For partnership. This time the tone was different. Joint infrastructure rollout, he proposed. Equal leverage. Daniel looked at me before responding. He wasn't asking permission. He was acknowledging partnership. You'll issue a public statement retracting the insinuations, Daniel said calmly. My father hesitated. And acknowledge Arabella as an independent advisor to this collaboration. There it was. Recognition. Not as daughter. As professional. The silence stretched long. Finally. Fine. That was revenge moment number 2. Not humiliation. Elevation. He had to publicly validate the very woman he once disowned. The press release changed the narrative entirely. RevTech and Kensington Holdings announced strategic infrastructure collaboration. My name appeared as advisory consultant. Not heiress. Not daughter. Professional. My inbox flooded with independent consulting offers within days. For the first time in my life, I built something not inherited. Earned. But the final reckoning hadn't happened yet. Because partnerships can mend business reputations. They don't automatically mend family fractures. And the real question remained, could my father ever see me as something other than an extension of his empire? That answer would come the night he finally said something I never expected to hear. And it wouldn't happen in a boardroom. It would happen alone. Without witnesses. Without cameras. Without power. The night my father asked to see me alone, I almost didn't go. Not because I was afraid. But because I no longer felt obligated. For most of my life when he summoned me I went. No questions. No hesitation. His tone was law. His approval was oxygen. Now, I had my own air. Still I agreed. Not for him. For closure. He chose a private members' library downtown. Quiet, dim lighting, leather chairs, the kind of place powerful men retreat to when they need to feel important. When I walked in he was already seated. No assistants. No board members. Just him. For the first time in my memory he looked tired. Not weak. But aged. You look well, he said as I sat across from him. I am. A pause. He adjusted his cufflinks. A nervous habit he thought no one noticed. I owe you something, he said finally. That sentence alone shifted the air. My father didn't owe. He demanded. I'm listening, I replied calmly. He inhaled slowly. When you walked away from this family, I believed you were making an emotional mistake. You said worse than that. Yes. He didn't deny it. That surprised me. I thought you would return within months. I assumed struggle would humble you. His honesty was clinical. Measured. But not cruel. And when Daniel succeeded, he continued, I convinced myself he manipulated you. You tried to destroy him. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. I tested him. You attacked him. Silence. Then, yes, there it was. No justification. Just admission. For a man like my father, that was monumental. But I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. Why? I asked softly. He looked at me then, not as an heiress, not as leverage, but as a person. Because I was afraid. That word didn't fit him. Afraid? Of what? I asked. Of losing control. The room felt smaller. I built everything from nothing, he said quietly. Every partnership calculated. Every alliance strategic. I believed that was how survival worked. It is, I said carefully. In business. Yes. His voice lowered. But I applied it to you. That landed deeper than I expected. You weren't an investment, he continued. But I treated you like one. Finally. Truth without performance. And when you chose someone I couldn't measure, he added, I panicked. You couldn't measure him because you couldn't buy him, I said gently. He didn't argue. I thought wealth guaranteed stability, he admitted. But you found stability without it. There it was. The core fracture. My father equated money with safety. I equated love with safety. We were speaking different languages for years. I didn't need you to approve, I said softly. I know that now. The silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was heavy with something else. Regret. He leaned forward slightly. I was wrong to disown you publicly. My chest tightened. That moment, the one that haunted me most, finally acknowledged. You humiliated me, I said calmly. I did. And you humiliated him. Yes. He didn't defend himself. Didn't reframe it as discipline. Just accepted it. For a man who ruled rooms, that surrender was louder than shouting. I can't undo that, he said. No, I replied. Another pause. But you can stop trying to control what you don't own. His jaw tightened briefly, then relaxed. He finally stopped negotiating. Daniel laughed quietly. That's progress. Yes, I said. It is. Months passed. The partnership between RevTech and Kensington Holdings stabilized both companies. Public perception shifted. But privately, things changed more subtly. My father no longer called to instruct. He called to ask. Sometimes about business. Sometimes about life. He still struggled with vulnerability. But he tried. And that mattered. One evening he invited Daniel and me to dinner. Not a gala. Not a board dinner. Just the three of us. At the penthouse. The same dining table where he once declared I was no longer his daughter. As we sat down, he poured wine himself. No staff. No performance. I underestimated you, he said to Daniel directly. Daniel nodded. You did. My father almost smiled. You built something extraordinary. Thank you. And you protected my daughter. That sentence felt different. Not possessive. Acknowledging. Daniel glanced at me briefly. I didn't protect her, he said calmly. We protect each other. My father absorbed that. Slowly. Then he looked at me. I built an empire thinking control was strength. He paused. But watching you walk away, that was strength. The irony settled heavily between us. For years he defined power. Now he was redefining it. I didn't walk away to hurt you, I said quietly. I know. I walked away because I couldn't breathe. His expression softened in a way I'd never seen. I never meant to suffocate you. I know. And for the first time, we weren't arguing. We weren't negotiating. We were understanding. But the final shift came later. Unexpectedly. 6 months after that dinner, Kensington Holdings faced a major restructuring vote. The board questioned leadership direction. My father's authority was being challenged. Old alliances weakening. And for the first time, he asked me for advice. Not as leverage. Not as inheritance. As perspective. What would you do? He asked during a private conversation in his office. I looked around the room, the skyline, the glass walls, the empire he built. I would stop treating loyalty as something you purchase, I said calmly. He didn't react immediately. You built fear-based alliances, I continued. They dissolve when leverage shifts. And you suggest? Build respect-based ones. He studied me carefully. You learned that from him. Yes, I said honestly. And from you. He raised an eyebrow. You taught me how power works, I explained. Daniel taught me how power lasts. That landed deep. He nodded slowly. And in that moment, I wasn't the rebellious daughter. I wasn't the heiress. I wasn't the disowned embarrassment. I was equal. Not financially, emotionally, intellectually. A year after the gala, Daniel and I hosted our own charity event. Not in a ballroom funded by Legacy, but in a renovated warehouse supporting small business innovation grants. Entrepreneurs, mechanics, founders, dreamers. My father attended, not as sponsor, as guest. When Daniel gave his speech, he spoke about second chances. When I spoke, I said something simple. Real wealth isn't inheritance. It's integrity. The applause wasn't polite. It was earned. And when the evening ended, my father approached quietly. You were right, he said. About what? Freedom is a better legacy than control. I smiled. He hesitated for a second. Then, awkwardly, almost unfamiliar with the gesture, he hugged me. Not for cameras, not for optics, just because he wanted to. And in that moment I realized something powerful. Revenge isn't destruction. It's evolution. It's refusing to shrink. It's succeeding without hatred. It's standing so firmly in your worth that even those who tried to diminish you must rise to meet you. I didn't win because my husband was secretly powerful. I didn't win because my father lost status. I won because I chose myself, even when it cost everything. And that was priceless.